the United States of America, and as strong and as proud and as great as ever.
The question we have been posing off and on all week, are we on the verge of war with Iran? We discuss for the full hour. Our guests, Pennsylvania Republican Senator Dave McCormack, columnist Neil Ferguson, specialists on Iran's nuclear program and weapons capabilities, retired Marine General Frank McKenzie, who led Central Command, Robert Costa on President Trump's calculus, and Jason Rezaian. As a journalist, he was held captive by the Iranian regime while it negotiated a now abandoned nuclear deal with the Obama administration. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Headlines matter, some more than others. This morning in Politico, America prepares for war. The New York Times, for Trump, military strike in Iran could serve symbolic purpose. The Wall Street Journal, in first, U.S. deploys combat jets to Israel for potential wartime mission. The Washington Post, Iran, U.S. resume nuclear negotiations as Trump's war clock ticks down. The Economist, Americans have no idea what the president wants from Iran. There is a core assumption in all these headlines and the journalism propelling them. Something is about to happen. The massive U.S. military buildup in the Middle East can no longer be viewed as a coercive diplomatic flex. What is there, including elite F-22 fighter jets and 2 carrier strike forces, can sustain aerial attacks for weeks. Congress fears this is coming. A vote in the House is planned next week to demand President Trump engage with Congress and explain his war plans. That schedule, however, appears behind the pace of things. Interestingly, CBS News polling shows 72% of Americans do not think the administration has clearly explained the U.S. position on military action against Iran. 53% told us they oppose war maneuvers to prevent Iran from making nuclear weapons. We are devoting the entire hour of this show to what appears a threshold decision for President Trump. War with Iran, yes or no? Is it about nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, and support of terrorism in the region? And if so, how can America get its way without coercing regime change? And even then, how can it and our allies be certain of future outcomes? How close is Iran to a nuclear bomb? Could it be placed on a warhead and launched with accuracy? How weak is the theocratic revolutionary regime that has bedeviled America and destabilized the region for decades? Is the Iranian regime on the verge of toppling, needing only a relatively low-risk military push? President Trump said Tuesday Iran's regime has killed 32,000 protesters for the Iranian people. What is their future with or without a regime that reflexively reaches for bloodshed and torment as an answer to dissent? We cannot answer all those questions, but we can try to make some meaningful headway, and we will. So let us begin. We start tonight with our Charlie Daggett, who comes to us from Tel Aviv, monitoring the U.S. military buildup in the region, and MTS Tayeb, who is in London, closely tracking today's negotiations between the United States and Iran and Geneva. Charlie, let's start with you. What do we know? What do you see? What is the feeling there in the region?
Yeah, Major, you just set the stage. And if it sounds like I'm going through what sounds like a shopping list of U.S. military assets in the region, it's exactly that. You mentioned in that lead up the F-22 stealth fighter jets that have arrived here or are on the way to Avda base here in Israel. That's a first, as far as I'm aware, to have the United States' most advanced fighters actually on the soil here. On the way, the USS Gerald R. Ford, that we know has left, from my own contacts, has left the Suda Bay port in Crete, on the way to the eastern Mediterranean. We hear it might even come to Haifa here in Israel. In addition to that, you have the USS Abraham Lincoln. You're talking about 12, 13, 14 guided missiles, destroyers, and cruisers. So we are talking about a lot, much more than would be a deterrent. And when you speak to U.S. officials that are part of the CENTCOM, Central Command area of operations or area of responsibility, this isn't just about the possibility of an attack against Iran, giving the president those options from limited strikes to a prolonged conflict, but this is about troop force protection as well. And that's where you need to have the carriers with squadrons of F-35s and F-18 fighter jets, the interceptors, the Patriots, the THAAD missile defenses. Israel came under attack last year in the 12-day war with Iran. The United States couldn't stop some of those missiles from hitting not far from here, just a couple blocks away, getting through Israel's vaunted Iron Dome system. That's what they're preparing for. And more is on the way, again, by the hour, Major.
MTS, you just heard Charlie describe the hardware. That's a colloquialism for what's going on in the region deployed by the United States. The diplomacy is going on around tables in Geneva. Wrap us up on what we learned about today's conversations.
Well, Major, they are serious, but they are happening against a backdrop of very different assumptions on each side about pressure and, frankly, capitulation. On the surface, this was a consequential round. Long hours, indirect talks mediated by Oman, and now a move towards technical discussions possibly in Vienna. Now that signals both sides believe there is at least a narrow path to something workable. But underneath that, there is a fundamental mismatch. Washington is still operating, at least in part, on the idea that sustained military and economic pressure should eventually force Iran to fold. Iran, by contrast, at least with the people we've been speaking to, is negotiating from a historical belief that if it does not capitulate under pressure, endurance will improve its leverage. These talks are less about rushing to a deal and more about testing whether the U.S. can really clarify what it actually wants, verification or surrender, and whether Iran believes compromise is safer than resistance. That's why this next phase, if we get to this next phase, is so pivotal. Major.
Setting the table for us tonight brilliantly, Charlie D'Agata and MTS Tayyab. I'm grateful to you both. Thank you so much. For more on the state of U.S.-Iranian relations, I'm joined by CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan, and to my right, retired Marine General Frank McKenzie, who most recently served as the commander of the United States Central Command. Let me start with you, General. It's great to have you with us. I appreciate your time. I hope you heard Charlie D'Agata describing everything that's in the region. Why would we have so much deployed there if we weren't on the cusp of doing something kinetic in Iran?
Well, the Iranians are people who count things. For us to have a credible threat against them, you have to bring that in. I actually am not of the opinion that it's necessarily going to be used. But the Iranians are going to look at it. They're going to understand the correlation of forces, is the phrase they would use to describe it. So you need that combat capability there, as also as described, not only to strike Iran, but to be able to defend ourselves against a probable Iranian counterstrike. So all that is very much necessary if we're going to execute these kinds of operations, or more directly, I would say, support the diplomacy that's ongoing with a fist behind it.
General, you said something I want to follow up on, because several guests on this program this week have said there are times when there is so much deployed, with it comes a kind of inevitability. You would argue it's not inevitable. There are still plenty of decisions before the president, but you just said you don't think it's necessarily certain that something's going to happen. Tell my audience why.
Major, I've actually been with President Trump when he made 3 big decisions. I was with him when he made the decision not to strike after our RQ-4 drone was shot down by the Iranians in the summer of 2019. There were lots of reasons to strike Iran then. I actually recommended that we did strike Iran. He chose not to do that, and he had good reason for doing that. I was part of the decision-making process when he chose to strike Qasem Soleimani, and that was the right decision at the right time and for the right reasons. And a week later, when the Iranians attacked our base at al-Assad in Iraq, no lethalities occurred. People were injured as a result of that, but no lethalities occurred. I watched President Trump, and what I thought was frankly a very statesmanlike action, walk away from continued escalation with Iran. So I would tell you he carries a couple of advantages into this. First of all, he has actually attacked Iran. He did it with Qasem Soleimani back in 2000, and he did it with last summer with our strike on the nuclear program. No other American president's ever done that. That's a powerful tool in his pocket as he approaches these negotiations. At the same time, I very much believe he's his own man when it comes to these kinds of decisions, and I think he will eventually come to some calculus internal himself. He won't. I don't believe he'll be overcome by the flow of military hardware into the region.
It's a perspective that we are very, very grateful to have, General. Margaret, I want to talk to you about something that MT has mentioned, because after the conversations today in Geneva, there was references to technical teams and bringing in the IAEA as a monitoring.
Right.
Does that signal something to you that's important or meaningful that we should latch on to?
Yes, President Trump wants a deal, and he's bringing in some technical experts that could help make that happen. But the bottom line from today, from the 6 hours they spent talking, is that negotiators just bought more time for President Trump to make that decision on what to do next. And by the way, for Iran's supreme leader to make a decision here, too. For Trump, he's weighing a few risks, political and national security. One is, do you run the risk of escalating military conflict at a time when there is not a clear and imminent threat to the United States, or at least none that has been explained to the public? Or do you run the risk of throwing a lifeline to a regime that is on the back foot, under a lot of economic pressure, and that lifeline is a diplomatic deal that allows them to stay in place and give them sanctions relief? Here's what we know. Iran wants to enrich uranium at levels that they could use for medical purposes, so that would be below bomb-grade material, right. But still gives them a capability that some may not be comfortable with. They don't want to talk about ballistic missiles. So this is not the comprehensive deal that Secretary Rubio says they want to get to. At the same time, and by the way, that's what the threat is to American allies, is the ballistic missiles. The Israelis very concerned about that. At the same time, the American wish list that we know about is a deal that doesn't expire and that provides a way to verify Iran will not ever pursue a nuclear weapon. So when I talk to my sources about the military options out there, they point back to Secretary Rubio saying this is a defensive posture, something that General McKenzie might have been nodding to there. And they really say, look, this is a broad range because we don't know what the president's intent here is. Does he just want to eliminate a threat to allies with the ballistic missile program? Does he actually want to hit nuclear sites? Does he want to carry out regime change, in which case maybe you do want to wait for that entire posture to be in place by mid-March. And by the way, in terms of informing the American public, we do have a date on the calendar. March 18th is scheduled to be the next time that Congress gets a public briefing on the latest U.S. intelligence assessment. The last one we got last March said that Iran had not decided to build a nuclear weapon. And we also know that the Defense Intelligence Agency says they won't have a ballistic missile that could hit the United States until 2035. Do those assessments stand? That could be decisive. If they've changed, the public and Congress have not been informed.
Excellent stuff, Margaret, as always. General McKenzie, you have a unique perspective on this. There have been others on my program this week who said, it would be hard for President Trump to not do anything militarily. He might lose face or respect after deploying all of these assets and not following through. Their words, not mine. Evaluate that based on your interactions and observations of the judgment calls President Trump has made in the past.
I simply think he will not be driven by the forces in the region. We were very close to striking Iraq in 2019. I mean, about as close as you can get when he decided not to do it. He's not afraid to make that call. And then I watched him make the same call after the strike on al-Assad. I think he's very much comfortable with those decisions. I would tell you this. Again, the fact that he has struck Iran hard with the blow against Qasem Soleimani and then the strike against the nuclear program, and he's the only president that's really done that, that's a powerful variable that Iranian leaders have to evaluate, and so that gives him, I think, a lot of room for decision making here, a lot of space that would probably not be available to other American presidents, frankly.
Very quickly, General, you've been party, I would assume, to conversations like this. Regime change has been something on the minds of U.S. governments in the past. Do you think it's achievable? And do you think that there are more opportunities if it comes than risks?
I think it's very hard to see regime change in Iran. I think it's easier to try to modify existing behavior, and those are going to be small steps I agree with the discussion about their ballistic missiles. The crown jewel of the Iranian defensive concept are their ballistic missiles. In order to have effect, you need to limit those. They would come down and be, I think, more hard over on protecting their ballistic missiles actually than their nuclear program. But there's the key right there, and there's where we need to work because they can strike this afternoon.
I appreciate your time and expertise very much. General Frank McKenzie, Margaret Brennan, always a pleasure. Fantastic stuff. Earlier, I spoke with Pennsylvania Republican Senator Dave McCormack, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Take a listen. Senator, does a U.S. military strike, possibly in coordination with Israel, feel imminent to you and to the people of Pennsylvania, based on your reading of them, want that to happen?
Well, good evening. Listen, I think what's happening is that the noose is tightening around Iran. It's shown itself to be a bankrupt in terms of its economy, in terms of its moral standing, in terms of its military. And I think President Trump's putting growing pressure on. I don't know if it's imminent, but clearly there's going to have to be a catalyst for change. And that catalyst is either going to be a dramatic turnabout in the way the Iran team has been negotiating, or there's going to be added pressure and added force. How that force manifests itself, I think it's too early to tell. But the president's positioned himself in such a way he's got a wide range of alternatives for kinetic action. And none of that's going to involve U.S. troops on the ground, but there's lots of ways to put added pressure on the Iranian regime.
In our latest poll, Senator, 72% said they don't believe the administration has explained the rationale for military action. Is that what you're picking up in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think I find a more receptive ear for people in Pennsylvania. I think the simple argument is as follows. Iran has blood on its hands. It's killed thousands of Americans. It has threatened time and again to destroy America if it gains access to a nuclear weapon, to destroy Israel, our closest ally in the region. And you just have to ask yourself a question. Does Iran having a nuclear weapon, or does Iran having growing capability pose a real risk to America? Would they use it? I think the answer is yes. In addition to that, I think we see the Iranian people rising up. And we want to stand behind those people seeking freedom. We don't want to do that in a way that gets America entangled in some lengthy war like happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. But we do want to support the forces of freedom. And so I think when people hear that, they understand. They don't want American troops coming home in body bags, that's for sure. So they're skeptical of long military engagement. But I also think President Trump's built some credibility with the way he's conducted military operations in Venezuela and earlier last year in Iran. I think he's got some money in the bank in terms of credibility with the American people.
Let's pick up on that Midnight Hammer operation last summer. The president said over and over the nuclear capabilities in Iran were obliterated. If they were, why would we need to go back?
Well, I think two things. I think, number one, I think it was always said at the time that there had been significant damage done on the nuclear capabilities. It wasn't clear whether they had set them back 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but it had set them back significantly. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Second is Iran has built an enormous missile capability, which it has used in the past on Israel and others. So there's clearly an enormous military capability there. It's been greatly eroded by the previous actions, but they're still, they pose significant military risk. And again, they've not only threatened to use that, they have been the source of underwriting terrorist proxies across the Middle East for decades. Every American that's been killed by Hezbollah, by Hamas, by the towers in Khobar, the funding mechanism behind that was Iran. This is a bad regime that has taken American lives, and we need to operate with humility. But make no mistake, it's in America's interest for this regime to either turn the page and become dramatically different, which I'm very skeptical about, or to ultimately turn over to a new day in Iran.
There's a theory that when an adversarial regime is weak, that is the time to strike. Do you believe the Iranian regime is as weak as it's ever been, not only internally, but externally with its proxies in the region, and that it's now time to take it on and displace it through American military might?
Well, I do believe it's at a point of weakness in terms of anything I've seen in decades. On the dimensions, I said, it's shown itself to be bankrupt economically. The sanctions have really bitten. 80% of the people live in poverty. The protests we're seeing from young people are at all-time highs. And the military capability that was, a reign of terror that was promised on Israel last year proved to be far less effective and capable than we had expected, I think. And so they've been greatly undermined, but they're still pose significant risks. So I think we are at a point where the regime is likely to change. I would guess if you and I were talking sometime around next year at this time, the regime will have changed. What process it goes through to get to that, I'm not sure. But in the end, America's interests are to get rid of the underwriter of terror, to get rid of any risk to the American people or Israel from nuclear weapons, and to lay a path for self-determination for the people of Iran, all without getting America entangled in years of bloody war in the Middle East, which we have no appetite for.
Easier said than done. History has reminded us of that. Pennsylvania Republican Senator Dave McCormack, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Still to come on this special edition of The Takeout, the Iran question. We take this question on. What do we know about the actual state of Iran's nuclear program? Also, is there a case for U.S. military intervention? A columnist for the Free Press and a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, Neil Ferguson, believes there is, and he joins me live. Plus, we already showed you the poll numbers on how Americans view military action or the potential military action of the United States and Iran. How could that impact President Trump politically, whatever he decides? We will tackle that question and many others. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds.
A stalker sends menacing messages to a young mother before she's murdered.
They all just kind of said, I can't believe this happened. He did it. The stalker did it.
There's a killer out there, and we're going to go after him.
But the investigation reveals a sinister setup.
I think his head is spinning, thinking about what else are they going to find.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount+.
Why America's last best place is at risk.
If the public land that you use were sold off, could you run your business?
Go to the ends of the earth.
We'll hit the heights.
A great adventure together.
And reach for the stars.
Star power. I like it.
So cool.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Something that's undeniable.
With mindfulness.
Innovative.
Magical.
It's like being a child.
And truly original reporting.
God, you do your research. I tell a good story.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
You both had talked about going on Survivor together.
Right.
A Survivor contestant believes his sister was murdered.
I'm sorry that I couldn't protect you.
And is determined to be her voice.
This is her speaking to everyone, saying, don't let this happen to you.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount+.
It could be the greatest turnaround in college football history.
What is the magic here?
The undefeated Big Ten champs, Indiana Hoosiers.
We're either going to get a deal or it's going to be unfortunate for them. I would think that would be enough time, 10, 15 days, pretty much maximum.
1 week ago today, President Trump issued what sounded like a 10 to 15-day ultimatum to reach a deal with Iran. Trump administration said publicly many times it prefers diplomacy. Our next guest thinks that was a mistake, the diplomatic track, giving Iran one more chance. Neil Ferguson joins me now. He's a columnist for the Free Press, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and we should note the Free Press is owned by Paramount Skydance, which you probably have read somewhere, is the parent company of CBS News. Neil, I'm grateful to have you with us. Why do you think it was a mistake to open yet another diplomatic track with the Iranian regime?
Well, I probably should qualify that. I don't think that this diplomatic track is real any more than it was last June. I think it's part of President Trump's style of negotiation to, as he's preparing for military action, string along the counterparty. I think it would be a mistake to make the kind of deal that the Iranians are talking about, which would allow them to continue to enrich uranium. But I doubt very much that President Trump is going to cut such a deal. After all, it would look an awful lot like a version of President Obama's ill-fated nuclear deal. So my sense is that what we're seeing at the moment, the negotiations that have been going on for some time, are really the prelude to U.S. strikes on Iran.
If I'm reading you correctly, Neil, what you're saying is the talks go on while everything needs to get in place on station, as the terminology goes, in the region militarily. And when everything is on station and ready to go, we have reached another threshold.
I think that's most likely, given that the Iranian position hasn't changed. They not only are continuing to enrich, they want to keep enriching, but they also intend to continue with the missile program, as well as with the proxies that they have funded throughout the region to carry out their terrorist campaigns. The American negotiators, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, as well as Secretary of State Marco Rubio, have made clear that President Trump's red lines include the end of enrichment, as well as the end of the missile program and the proxy funding. The Iranians are not going to give ground on those issues. And so I think this is really just a kind of talking shop until military action is ready to go. Now, I give the administration credit. They have been very careful in this military buildup, which is the biggest we've seen since 2003. They're also making it clear that they don't intend anything remotely like the invasion of Iraq. This is going to be the kind of surgical strike that President Trump is known to prefer. I think it's impressive that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, has made it clear to the president this is a much tougher operation than Venezuela. But these are the kinds of deliberate and careful steps that you would want to see as the United States prepares to take military action against a regime that, remember, has forfeited any legitimacy that it had left. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has massacred between 30 and 40,000 of his own people. President Trump made it very clear as that massacre was playing out that it would not stand and that there would be consequences. It's pretty hard for the president not to follow through. He couldn't immediately do it because the military assets weren't in place. They are now in place. Iran is surrounded. It has no friends that can really aid it, not Russia. There's barely any help available from China. Iran is on its own pretty much. And from that point of view, there isn't a massive downside risk from the vantage point of the United States. It is a very, very unequal fight.
Neil Ferguson, I appreciate your time and expertise very much, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Democratic lawmakers and a handful of Republicans are asking, some would say demanding, President Trump provide more clarity, more justification for any U.S. intervention in Iran. On this show Tuesday, Arizona Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego said Americans simply do not have a desire for another war in the Middle East. Listen.
We're sick of wars. It costs us too much, both in terms of just energy and treasury, but also in the fact that, we'll be sacrificing our men and women for a mission that's unclear. The president's not justified why he's even moving in that direction. Are we going after nuclear weapons? Are we going after terrorists? Are we going after ballistic missiles? Are we doing this to support Israel? None of that has been very clear.
Elliot Ackerman and Robert Costa join me now. Elliot is a friend of the show, been on here many times. I'm happy to say that. Former CIA officer and current CBS News contributor. Robert Acosta, of course, to my left, CBS News chief Washington analyst and Sunday morning national correspondent. Robert, let me start with you. You've had a chance to talk to the president this week, those around him, those in the MAGA universe. What's the appraisal? What's the sense of things?
Big picture, Major, is that the president's not viewing this from an ideological perspective. He doesn't have some sort of mission he wants to enact throughout the whole region. This is very much based on the reality he's being briefed on from his officials inside the administration, from intelligence officers. He wants to really hear what's the extent of a possible nuclear weapon development program inside of Iran, what action needs to be taken, how do the Israelis see it, how do other stakeholders in the region see it. And he sees it like he sees almost everything as a deal. Is there a transaction here? Can Iran say certain things and take certain steps to avoid a military strike? But he's not taking anything off the table.
Elliot, you heard Robert Costa talk about the idea that this is a certain place, certain region, certain set of dynamics, not what George W. Bush and those around him contemplated in 2003. Well, if we topple Saddam Hussein, possibly we set a small brush fire of democracy throughout the entire region. Evaluate that.
I mean, I'm not sure it is quite as clear cut. I think as the congressman made the point before, it isn't yet clear. Is this about decapitating the Iranian regime? Is it about their nuclear program? Is it their ballistic missiles program? What is the scope of the change that we are trying to effect? And it's important to be clear about that, not only when we're communicating to our adversaries, but also that we in the administration know what are the goals here. Because if you don't clearly know your goals, you open yourself up to mission creep, which is how the United States, particularly in the Middle East in the past, has gotten bogged down.
And if something were launched, Iran would have a response. What are the risks and the variables with what Iran could do in the region?
It's important to keep in mind, I mean, war is politics by other means. So, for instance, we were discussing Iraq. I mean, when the Iraq war began, it was with bipartisan support. And that gave President Bush a certain runway to prosecute that war, which, quickly dissipated. In the case of President Trump, I think if this were brought in front of Congress, there would obviously not be that bipartisan support. So as the politics change at home, that changes the calculus. And if we were to see, for instance, a U.S. service member shot down or a strike on a U.S. ship that was affected, that would also radically change the politics on these strikes in Iraq. And I think the administration just needs to be prepared for that, not only prepared militarily, but also prepared politically.
Robert, pick up on that point. Prepared politically for things that become variables and sometimes hazardous ones once you commence.
That's a great point. And you see right now inside the Republican Party, fragile ground for President Trump to tread on when it comes to what his party is willing to do. They're giving him a lot of bandwidth and room to make a decision. When I spoke to Steve Bannon earlier this week, a key Trump ally who's somewhat skeptical, to say the least, of some of this intervention, he's still not criticizing the president about possible military action. But the Republican Party, in so many of the grassroots corners of the party, have felt burned by the Bush experience 25 years on now and really believe that the party needs to be careful about moving forward with this kind of escalation.
And Elliot, when you think about the region, Israel is an important part of this conversation. Would you imagine, based on your experience, that they would be co-belligerents in this, meaning if the United States launches something, Israel would participate and be one of the places most potentially vulnerable? And so what we're talking about in terms of risk to U.S. personnel might first flow through anything that might come Israel's way?
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. I mean, obviously, Israel plays a key role in this, and the set of events that have placed Iran in this position, I mean, really began with the October 7th attacks. So Israel is going to be a very important player in any military action that goes forward. But then just again, to hit this political point, one more time, as the United States launches these strikes, every action provokes an equal and opposite reaction. And, our U.S. forces so far have been exemplary in their professionalism and their ability to get the mission done. But, as we saw at the State of the Union, one of the pilots being honored there, was in a Chinook that was nearly shot down in Venezuela. What would have happened if that helicopter had been shot down in Venezuela? And what would happen if you were to have a similar type of incident in Iran? It would very quickly potentially make the war about something else, maybe a war where we're, avenging the fact that we've been attacked as Americans. And there's plenty of historical precedent for that.
Elliot, very quickly, it's been said that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has made it very clear to President Trump, whatever you want to do in Iran is not like Venezuela. Don't be tempted that one is as doable as the other.
And I think that's because the goals in Venezuela, as we understand them now, were very, very clear. It was a decapitation operation against Maduro. The goals in Iran, at least as presented now, seem much more vague, and it's also difficult to see how there is quite as surgical a target.
Elliot Ackerman, I appreciate the time very much. Bob Costa, last word.
It's so true what Elliot's saying, that there is a lot of risk here for President Trump, and he has been averse since he entered politics to moving forward with this type of action. Yes, he's taken strikes here or there, but he has not wholesale really gotten into a regional war. And so he's considering that, I'm told, in these final hours before a possible decision.
Elliot Ackerman, appreciate your time. Robert Costa here with me at the desk. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you. Next, state of Iran's nuclear production. What is it? Two experts join us to assess what we know, what Iran has said, and what we're still trying to find out. That's next, right here on The Takeout.
I want to know what's going on in the world. You can't do that if you're just sitting in a chair, reading about what other people have found. You have to get out there and listen. By telling people about each other, you actually bring this country together. There are big questions that all of us are asking. I want to get you the answers. I'm Tony DeCopel. Join me on the CBS Evening News.
Sunday morning, we consider The Kiss, plus the Eagles' greatest hits, 50 years and counting, and meet Penny, a winner in anyone's book.
Where are some of America's funniest people getting their start?
Dutch people, not the most giving laughers.
60 Minutes goes to Amsterdam.
Dutch people laugh like this. Ha ha!
We don't want to accept that there's evil that walks amongst us, but it does.
You know how when you meet somebody, you can't put your finger on it, but something's not right?
You never know what anybody is capable of.
I am a serial killer who's only killed once.
Did you think when this goes public, this town's gonna be shocked?
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with a 30-year-old cold case, it seems like there's not a lot of hope.
We knew there was a monster out there and we were going to find him and get him.
Look at him just coming around the corner like that.
We started tracking the area.
When did this accident scene become a crime scene?
Police!
You called him a lying liar who lies about lying.
Do you know why we're stopping you today?
What makes you so sure that you stabbed your sister while you were sleepwalking?
I never got a chance to see her one last time.
Such injustice. I can't believe they did this to her.
But no matter how hard it gets, never give up.
I'm Natalie Morales with 48 Hours. Did you have anything to do with Joanna Hunter's death?
This is a family that just wants justice.
Chilling with the queen, her name is Gail King.
Hey!
CBS Morning.
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 CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount Plus. See you at 7.
CBS Mornings.
I want a mug. Yeah, good mug.
The only way to get a 360-degree understanding of America is to get out there in America. There really is no swing at all when it comes to the priorities of everyday people. We care about how secure our job is, whether we can plan on retiring with dignity, whether our kids can have a brighter future than we have today. These are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
Welcome back. President Trump has kept a watchful eye on Iran since he returned to office. 8 months ago, the United States targeted Iran's nuclear facilities. And the way Trump described the strikes back then made it seem like another attack might not be necessary.
The strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Earlier, I spoke with national security analyst Matt Kroenig and Joe Cirincione about where Iran's nuclear program stands today. Here's that conversation. Matt, I want to start with you. Joe, I also want you to take a swing at this. About a week ago, Steve Witkoff, president's chief envoy in this matter, said, quote, Iran was probably a week away from having industrial-grade bomb-making material. That sounds scary, is it?
It is scary. It probably is not accurate. Last summer, when the United States took military action against Iran's nuclear program, at that time, it was very close to having a nuclear weapon. That might have been what he was referring to. But since the United States and Israel took action against Iran's nuclear program last summer, it did effectively set the program back. So I think it's no longer accurate to say they're that close to having bomb-grade material.
And, Joe, the long arc of this analytical intelligence matter has been, do you have material to make a bomb? Can you put it on a warhead? Can you send that warhead, if you can do that, accurately to a target that we would be concerned about? Evaluate those key questions.
Right. So the hardest part of making a nuclear bomb is making the material, the highly enriched uranium or plutonium. That's what we're worried that Iran is trying to do under the cover of a civilian program. The same centrifuges that can enrich uranium to low grade for fuel can enrich it to high grade for the core of a bomb. We believe that Iran still has enough centrifuges and enough feedstock, 60% enriched uranium, that it could feed it back into those centrifuges and make the core of a bomb in a matter of weeks, whether it's a week or a month, we don't know. But that's just the beginning. Then you've got to have a design for a bomb. They might have that. Then you've got to manufacture it. That takes months. And then you probably have to test it to make sure it works. The North Koreans, for example, their first test was a fizzle, didn't work. So you got to have confidence. And then you've got to put it on a ballistic missile that has enough range to reach your target and a reentry vehicle that can survive the stresses and strain of hitting the target. All that is extremely complex. It would probably take them about a year or more to do that, and we would see them doing it. So there is no imminent nuclear threat from Iran.
Matt, do you agree with that?
I agree with that. I would just also point out that for years, people said, well, North Korea is so far away, just has some material. It's going to take them a long time to develop ballistic missiles. But now the estimates are that they have about 60 nuclear weapons that can reach the continental United States. So I do think the Iranian nuclear threat is a serious one. Yes, it will take time, but if we sleep on it, they can develop these capabilities. And as Marco Rubio pointed out, they have worked on ICBMs in the past. They may be working on those again. And those are missiles that could range the continental United States.
Let's pick up on that point, because the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor, we should always remind ourselves he has two jobs, said that the ballistic missiles Iran possesses are solely designed, this is a quote, solely designed to attack America and Americans. Joe, that would be news to the Israelis and the Saudis.
Absolutely. Look, the Iranians don't have an air force the way the Saudis or UAE or Israel does. Missiles are their air force. So they see that as essential to their defense. That's what protects them from attacks by other countries. They're capable missiles. They've been working on this for decades. But the maximum range is about 3,000 kilometers, about 1,200 miles. So they can hit maybe Turkey at the outset, southern Greece, but not North America.
And not Europe.
Not even northern or central Europe. So do they have a capability? Yes. Do they have a program to develop longer range? Yes. But they've been doing this for 20 years. There's nothing imminent about any of this threat.
Matt, when I read Politico Playbook this morning, listing the many quotes that have come from top administration officials, including off-the-record guidance that they are talking about not when to attack, but the sequencing of attacks, quote, it all feels very 2003, meaning the lead up to the Iraq war and Iraq invasion. Does it feel 2003 to you?
Well, I think there are some important differences. First of all, nobody's talking about a major military invasion, boots on the ground, 20-year occupation. All the options that are being considered are airstrikes. So it wouldn't be the kind of quagmire we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think the reason we're here is, if people remember, there were these massive uprisings against the regime in January. President Trump did set a red line and say if the Iranian government kills its people, there will be consequences. He told the Iranian people, rise up and seize your institutions, help is on the way. He couldn't act at the time because U.S. military forces were elsewhere, including in the Western Hemisphere. So now he's repositioned, and I do think there would be consequences to him just backing down from that threat. So I think the question now is not so much will the United States strike. I think we will. It's really a question of what are the targets.
Joe, do you agree with that?
I think there's a 75% chance we're going to go. I mean, part of that is just the amount of force we've amassed in the region. This is an unprecedented buildup. I think it's even more than we had in 2003. What's striking to me...
And when you have a buildup like that, does there become an inevitability?
There's inertia that comes with that. Everybody's ready to go. We have moved half of our available combat aircraft in the world to the Middle East. That is an enormous commitment. And so this is costing hundreds of millions of dollars. The people are being put on warning, ready to go. There's a certain inertia to that. And there's a commitment trap. Here's the president, how he's going to look if he backs down from his tough talk, from red lines he previously drew. And the president also might want to distract attention from some of his domestic concerns. So going to war is a tried and true attempt to do that. The problem is that he might not be able to accomplish what he wants to do. Could he damage the programs? Absolutely. Could he assassinate large parts of the leadership? Absolutely. Could he overthrow the regime? No war in history that I can think of has actually overthrown a regime by air power alone. You got to have boots on the ground if you want to do that, particularly with a country the size of Iraq, 90 million people, a vast area. This is why two things strike me. One, there's no real reason to go to war right now. We don't know what the objectives are. And most important, we haven't been having a debate about this. Unlike 2003, there's no month-long discussion building American support or allied support for going to war. Zero, nada discussion about this, even in the State of the Union.
And I'm going to give you 30 seconds for the last word.
Well, I think there is a reason. One, if you look back to late last year, there was a discussion about Iran reconstituting its missile program. The Israelis approached the United States about possibly restriking the missile program. Then you have this uprising and the president setting a red line. And so I do think the question is there some kind of large-scale attack that's meant to destabilize the regime? I agree with Joe, that's unlikely to work and would be costly. Or is it some kind of more military limited action against the missile and nuclear program, which is what I'd expect?
You've given us a tremendous amount of information. I appreciate it both. Matt and Joe,
the most we've ever agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
He was held captive in Iran for more than a year. Jason Rezaian joins us next to give us his perspective on where tensions with the United States and Iran stand. You're watching the special edition of The Takeout.
I want to know what's going on in the world. You can't do that if you're just sitting in a chair, reading about what other people have found. You have to get out there and listen. By telling people about each other, you actually bring this country together. There are big questions that all of us are asking. I want to get you the answers. I'm Tony DeCopel. Join me on the CBS Evening News.
Sunday morning, we consider the Kiss, plus the Eagles' greatest hits, 50 years and counting, and meet Penny, a winner in anyone's book.
Where are some of America's funniest people getting their start?
Dutch people, not the most giving laughers.
60 Minutes goes to Amsterdam.
Dutch people laugh like this. Ha ha!
We don't want to accept that there's evil that walks amongst us, but it does.
You know how when you meet somebody, you can't put your finger on it, but something's not right?
You never know what anybody is capable of.
I am a serial killer who's only killed once.
Did you think when this goes public, this town's gonna be shocked?
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with a 30-year-old cold case, it seems like there's not a lot of hope.
We knew there was a monster out there and we were going to find him and get him.
Look at him just coming around the corner like that.
We started tracking the area.
When did this accident scene become a crime scene?
Police! You called him a lying liar who lies about lying.
Do you know why we're stopping you today?
What makes you so sure that you stabbed your sister while you were sleepwalking?
I never got a chance to see her one last time.
Such injustice. I can't believe they did this to her.
But no matter how hard it gets, never give up.
I'm Natalie Morales with 48 Hours. Did you have anything to do with Joanna Hunter's death?
This is a family that just wants justice.
Chilling with the queen, her name is Gail King. Hey!
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning.
CBS Morning. CBS Morning.
CBS Mornings on CBS and where else? Paramount. See you at 7.
CBS Mornings.
I want a mug.
Yeah, good mug.
The only way to get a 360-degree understanding of America is to get out there in America. There really is no swing at all when it comes to the priorities of everyday people. We care about how secure our job is, whether we can plan on retiring with dignity, whether our kids can have a brighter future than we have today. These are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
Welcome back. Journalist Jason Rezaian spent 544 days unjustly imprisoned in Iran before being released January 2016. We talked with him because he has a unique experience and perspective on Iran, the U.S., and possibly their combined future. Listen. You have, Jason, painful lived experience with the Iranian regime, but you also know the place and you know the people. Peer into this moment for me, would you?
Major, it's a devastating time inside Iran over the last several weeks. Thousands, potentially tens of thousands of people were massacred in the streets of Iran for protesting for very basic things. They've been denied their right to expression, their civil liberties. It's a repressive regime that's ruled over that country for 47 years, but even they have not meted out the kind of violence that they did just a month or so ago. And I think the folks inside Iran are stuck, as always, between a very hard rock and a harder place. The reality is, I don't think they have a lot of friends in the world at this point, certainly not within their own leadership. Israel unleashed a war last summer on Iran over a 12-day period that the United States joined into. I know that there are a lot of people inside Iran calling for direct intervention into the affairs of that country, but I don't think anybody is looking for military strikes, especially not on civilian areas. So I think it's a really tough situation right now. And I want to remind listeners, viewers, that 6 Americans at least are currently being detained in Iran, held hostage, wrongfully detained, just like I was a decade or so ago. So this is much bigger than the current moment. It's part of a long history of antagonism between the United States and Iran. And as always, the Iranian people are paying the price.
What do you think the risks are, particularly to those Americans in wrongful detention in Iran, should there be another wave of strikes?
Well, last summer, Evin prison, where I and all of these current hostages are being held, was struck by Israeli missiles. Several people inside the prison were killed. Presumably, prison officials were being targeted, but innocent civilians and defenseless prisoners were killed as well. I also want to point out that in addition to Americans, 2 British nationals, a husband and wife, travel bloggers, were convicted last week on completely bogus espionage charges, and a journalism colleague of yours and mine, the bureau chief of NHK, a Japanese national broadcaster, has been languishing in that same prison for over a month. That news just broke last evening, and look, it certainly feels like they're collecting human shields.
The president said in the State of the Union address 32,000 Iranians were killed by the regime. Does that number sound correct to you?
Impossible to know, because there aren't any independent trackers inside the country. Human rights organizations take very, very seriously the work of verifying the cases, and I think it's about 7,000 so far that have already been documented, but there are certainly many more. And I think that the precise number, whatever it is shocking and beyond the pale. So I do think that there is a role for the United States and the international community to play, not only in condemning the killing of peaceful protesters, but also holding Iranian leadership accountable. I would just urge that they find a way to do it that doesn't put more Iranians' lives in harm's way.
There's no way to know the absolute answer to this question, Jason. But what do you think might unfold if the regime fell?
I've thought about that for many years. I've been covering Iran for 25 years, Major. I've traveled to that country starting in 2001, spent much of my time between 2001 and 2014 living and working in Iran. And the question of what would come next has been on people's minds and lips for a very long time. Unfortunately, I don't think that there is a credible replacement at this point. That's not to say that we want to see the Islamic Republic survive the current moment. They've made it very clear that they have nothing to offer the people of this country. But unfortunately, over a 47-year period, we have a diaspora that is incredibly educated, incredibly high income, one of the most connected diasporas in the world, and yet we haven't been able to organize politically in this country. And I see rumblings of that right now. But what I hope not to see happen in Iran is the country to devolve into any sort of civil strife. You have a country of 90 million people with a lot of different ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and allegiances. And the worst thing that could happen is a civil war in that country.
Jason, I appreciate the time, as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Major.
Happy Thursday, everyone. This was a special edition of The Takeout to try to answer as many of the Iran questions as we possibly could, doing so in a relentlessly curious, reliably civil, maybe occasionally clever way. The Daily Report, coming up next.
I want to know what's going on in the world. You can't do that if you're just sitting in a chair, reading about what other people have found. You have to get out there and listen. By telling people about each other, you actually bring this country together. There are big questions that all of us are asking. I want to get you the answers. I'm Tony DeCopel. Join me on the CBS Evening News.
Sunday morning, we consider The Kiss, plus the Eagles' greatest hits, 50 years and counting, and meet Penny, a winner in anyone's book.
Where are some of America's funniest people getting their start?
Dutch people, not the most giving laughers.
60 Minutes goes to Amsterdam.